This video is going to be on how to do the non-calculator question of estimating. Okay, so on your non-calculator paper, you may get early on a question where they ask you to estimate the value of quite a complicated sum, which usually involve decimal numbers. Now this word estimate means put down a rough answer to the sum. So the way we do that is we round each of the numbers in the sum to one significant figure. Now what do I mean by this? Well, 51.6, the 5, which is the first number, is in the tens place. So that means I'm going to round that number to the nearest 10. So 51.6 rounded to the nearest 10 is 50. Times by 3.13. The 3 at the front here is in the units position, so I'm going to round this to the nearest unit, which is 3. And finally, 4.87, well, the 4, which is the first number, is in the units again. So rounding this, remembering that this 8 being bigger than 5 means that that 4 rounds up to a 5. So here I've rounded all my numbers, and if you've done this correctly, all of your numbers in your sum should now either be one digit or one digit with zeros. So to show this as an estimation, usually we use curly equal signs. So this is my estimate. So now I can do my sum. So starting with the top, 50 times 3 is 150. And then I'm going to divide that by 5, and I get a rough answer of 30, or an estimate of 30. Right, so below I've got a practice question for you to have a go at. Pause the video, and I'll go through the answer in a moment. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at that. Well, I'm going to start off by putting my estimation sign in. Right, so now I'm going to round all of my numbers. So 72.3 is going to round to 70, plus 29.3 is going to round to 30. And then underneath, 4.98 is going to round to 5. So again, I'm going to do my sum on top first, 70 plus 30, which is 100. Divide it by 5, and I get an estimate of 20. These next examples I'm going to go through are pretty similar to the ones we've done before, but you'll see that they have this extra element of difficulty to them. So we're going to start off exactly as we've done before. We're going to round our numbers. So 63.9 is going to round to 60. 41.8 is going to round to 40. And underneath this denominator is going to round to 0.5. Now we're going to add the top, just like we did in the last example. And here you will see where the difficulty comes. Now we're left with 100 divided by 0.5. Now at this point, we just need to remind ourselves what dividing actually means. Okay, so in this case, 100 divided by 0.5 is looking for how many 0.5s or halves fit into 100. And here you'll see that the answer is 200 halves fit into 100. So the conclusion is that if you divide by 0.5, it is the same as timesing by 2. This next example, I'm going to start exactly the same. I'm going to start by rounding. 14.7 is 10 times 64.8, which would be 60, and that's going to be divided by 0.2. So again, I'm going to start off by timesing the top, which is 600, and here I need to divide by 0.2. So at this point here again, I need to think about how many 0.2s fit into 600. And as dividing by a half was the same as timesing by 2, dividing by 0.2, or 1/5, is the same as timesing by 5. So here I need to do 600 times by 5, which is 30, the 2 zeros, 3,000. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions for you to have a go at below. Just remember these two facts, that dividing by 0.5 is the same as timesing by 2, and dividing by 0.2 is the same as timesing by 5. Okay, so to do our estimate, we're going to start off by rounding. So 51.9 becomes 50, 82.8 becomes 80, and we're dividing by 0.2. 2. So 50 times 80 is 4,000. Divide it by 0.2. Now remember, dividing by 0.2 is the same as timesing by 5. So timesing by 5, we get 20 with the 3 zeros, 20,000. Okay, so the next one again, start off by rounding. 68.2 becomes 70, plus 10.28, just going to be 10. Divide it by 0.5, equals 70 plus 10 is 80. Divide by 0.5. Now remember, dividing by 0.5 is the same as timesing by 2. So 80 times by 2 is 160. Now another good division to know as well is when you divide by 0.1. Hopefully you remember that 0.1 is the same as a tenth, so in this case it's the same as timesing by 10. Sometimes they give you some other things that are a little bit more challenging, like for example dividing by 0.05. As you can see here, this is 10 times smaller, so that's going to mean that we're going to be timesing by something 10 times bigger. So 0.5 was times by 2. In this case, we'd be timesing by 20, 10 times bigger. Okay, so just remember with these estimate questions, these important properties. So in this last example, they may ask you to estimate the value of a square root. Now, if you remember, a square root is the opposite of squaring. So the trick to this question is to know your square numbers. So I'm going to quickly just write up the square numbers on the board. So here are my square numbers. Now, if you remember, square numbers are created by timesing numbers by themselves. So for example, the top one, 1 times 1, then I've got 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 4 is 16, etc., etc., until I get this 10 times 10 down the bottom here. Now I can go back to whole numbers if I use square roots. So the square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 4 is 2, square root of 9 is 3, and I'm going to fill in all the others. So here you can see I've got some square roots. Now, if I know these, now this estimating becomes a bit easier. You can see that the square root of 17 is in between the square root of 16, which is 4, and the square root of 25, which is 5. Now, I know that 17 is a lot closer to 16 than 25, so I'm going to pick a decimal number close to 4. So I'm going to pick 4.1. Okay, so down the bottom, I've got one for you to have a go at. See if you can estimate the value of 28. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at this. Now, I know that the square root of 28 is sandwiched between the square root of 25, which is 5, and the square root of 36, which is 6. So it's going to be between 5 and 6. I also know that it's slightly closer to 5 than it is to 6. So I'm going to pick a number closer to 5, and I'm going to estimate it at 5.3. Okay, so hopefully that's helped you to answer estimation questions. Just be really careful about spotting that word estimate in your non-calculator paper. The biggest mistake people make is that they forget to round the numbers and they spend an awful lot of time trying to work out a very complicated sum for no marks whatsoever. Okay, so practice loads of exam questions and good luck.